There are places I remember all my life, though some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone and some remain. All these places had their moments with lovers and friends. I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life, I love them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one there with you. And these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. And I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. For people and things that went before. And I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more.
The sacred past unfold. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold. Precious Father, loving Mother, fly across the lonely years, and old home scenes of my childhood, in fond memories appear. Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul. In the stillness of the midnight, precious sacred scenes unfold.
afternoon. And I want to categorize that just a tad. Paul found a way to relate to everyone that he met in life. I don't care what level of society you come from, what your job might be, what your background might be, Paul could find a way to carry on a conversation with you. I was honored to call him friend. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Linda, the garden looks great. Yes. I know that Paul will be smiling as he looks down. He'd love to be right in the midst of us. This would be just his element right here. Could we bow our head for a word of prayer and ask God's blessing on the service this afternoon? Father, Paul's beloved bride, and all the rest of my family that's come here from near and far, and all you great folks here that have helped out so much. And all I can tell you is that, Paul was a good son, good brother, a really good husband. And I last saw him a week before he passed. He was in Atlanta with Linda, and he found out he was going to be my best man at my wedding. And he had met Tananya, who's back here in
Paul says, don't you have a key to unlock it? Paul Daniels loved laughter. Guys, this is an open floor. Someone please tell us a good Paul Daniels story. Anyone?
I said, being Jewish from Piedmont, Alabama, I said, I know there's not a lot of synagogues down there. I said, what did you do on Christmas morning? And he said, well, Jack, he said, my parents owned a mercantile store in downtown Piedmont. And he said, right before Christmas, it would be so busy. He said, we just worked and worked and worked during the Christmas rush. And I said, well, what did you do on Christmas morning, Paul? Well, he said, we'd walk down to the store. And he said, Daddy had unlocked the doors. Me and Ralph and Robin and Mom would walk in, and there'd be stuff laying all over the floor. Empty boxes and tissue paper. And I said, so I guess that was quite a mess to clean up. And he said, oh, we didn't clean it up. He said, we all stood in a big circle and held hands and sung, what a friend we have in Jesus.
My first remembrance of Paul, well, I was in like the 10th or 11th grade, and Paul had squared off with one of my friends up here on campus at Piedmont High School, and he was trying to gain entrance into our little clique, and we were resistant to that. So he and a buddy of mine had squared off up there, and I don't remember whether there was any licks passed or not, but there was some pushing and some posturing, and after that, Paul was accepted for some reason. I guess he just had to stand up. But he got interested in drag racing, and there was 2 or 3 guys older than us that were much more equipped to get into it than we were. Red Ford, Clark Davis, Sonny Ray, and some more. Red Ford coincidentally had a red Ford. Imagine that. A beautiful 1964 red Ford, and Paul would leave for school like 15 minutes early and go down and park in front of Red and Sandy's house and look at that red Ford for 15 minutes. Today they'd haul him off as some kind of pervert, I guess. Well, he had a little hard time catching on to good old boy vernacular, I guess you'd call it, and he was out at Red's, and Red was working on his car, and Paul said, can I help you do something? And Red says, take that wire brush over and hit that radiator a lick or two. And Red heard a noise, and he looked around, and Paul was physically hitting a lick or two. So, let's see. I had a little stuff wrote down here. The guy, I've already had two of my stories stolen. And Ralph and Robin were always there. They were just kids, and Robin was about 12, I guess, and had just learned how to make cinnamon toast. And so Paul and I learned how to manipulate her by saying, "Hey, Robin, honey, how about fixing us some cinnamon toast and some iced tea?" And that would always do the trick. Meanwhile, Ralph was in one of the back bedrooms throwing a tennis ball up against the wall over and over and over and over and over. Or he would be underlining the sports page from the Anniston Star. And he loaned me a book on Bear Bryant recently, and I found out he's still underlining stuff. Who would have thought he'd grow up to be running Fulton County, Georgia? Tempest. And the company cars. The Daniels had 2 station wagons that were personal vehicles, but they also went to Atlanta and bought stuff for the store and hauled it back, so I like to call them the company cars. And you all know that Paul loved to ride in the mountains and look for deer and turkeys and moonshine steels and whatever. But I'm going to tell you, Grandma's 1966 Tempest has been to the top of Duggar Mountain up there, as have the station wagons, and they all performed well. They had to suffice till he got the yellow Jeep, and then he terrorized the whole country.
And we're going down through there, and we finally come up on this house on the left. There were signs everywhere: stop, do not go farther, no soliciting, all kind of signs. And naturally, Paul stops right in the middle of the road, and I say, "Paul, he don't want no visitors. He don't want anybody. Let's just turn around and go on." No, I'm gonna talk to him. Well, we get out. This guy, he comes out on the porch with a shotgun. And I'm thinking, oh no. Well, within 5 minutes, Paul has this guy laughing and telling us all where this road goes. And within that 5 minutes, Paul also told him that he was Jewish. and with my experience with Paul, when we would meet a stranger somewhere, he would tell the guy that he was Jewish or the female to get a reaction out of them. And my life was better by knowing Paul Daniels. And like Derek said, he was one of the smartest people I ever knew, and he was my friend.
Be short, but in Paul's blogs, if you read them, he talked a lot about Israel and put a lot of pictures up. And so one time, Paul loved the desert, and he roamed around the desert for weeks on end once with some Bedouin that he got to guide him, and was on a camel and slept in their encampments and didn't look at their women because you get your throat cut for that. Of course, you couldn't see anything because they were all under these robes and stuff, but you still didn't want to look. And but he was out one day in the Sinai, and this is when the Sinai was Israel had taken the Sinai after the 67 war and held it till we gave it back to the Egyptians later, about 10, 12 years later. And so he was roaming around there with this Bedouin guide, and he'd been out there with a French guy he'd hooked up with, but after about 3 weeks, I think that guy said, "Hey, it's time to go back and get a shower or something." So they were roaming around, they got into a closed military zone. And all of a sudden, this Israeli half-track pulls up, and these soldiers bounce out of it and want to know, this American boy out here, 6'7", what you doing here? And so he said, what brings you to Israel? And he said, well, my brother, he's playing pro basketball over here in Haifa, which of course was a long way from the Sinai. And luckily, one of the officers was from Haifa. So then they became best friends. It was like, well, can you get us tickets? Can you, all this kind of stuff. And then he turned to this Bedouin guide and he says, now, I want you to know that we're going to check up, and you know, we want to make sure nothing happens to him. Of course, Paul, he'd become great friends with this guy, but that's the kind of guy Paul was. He loved the desert. He loved roaming around the Golan Heights on the Syrian border. He loved working on the kibbutz in the apple orchards, or driving a tractor. All the things that, of course, I never did in my life and don't intend to start now. You know, there were no tennis courts out in the desert, and definitely no basketball goals I ever saw. But anyway, I just wanted to share something about his time in Israel. He came to visit me, and about 4 or 5 years later, he came home. He really was tied to the land there, the way he became tied to this garden.